I remember as like a little kid, my grandfather was like a historian. Don't laugh, all right? I was a Civil War reenactor, okay? All right, I was a little black kid, Civil War reenactor, all right? And if you follow this channel and you like the video, I might show the photos. There is a painting of me done by some old biddy that has me looking like a slave, and I definitely don't look like a slave. I look like I was probably in the house. But one of the biggest things in history that I've always had to ask myself, right? Because you're going to call it conspiracies, right? But I'm just calling it reality and just putting things in a perspective for you, okay? The idea that John Wilkes Booth committed murder on Abraham Lincoln just because he wanted to make the South rise again has never made sense to me. Because these things are not just think for a second. You as an average person, even if you hated someone so much, what would it take for you to get to the point? A president, the president, Lincoln, probably the best one since George Washington, right? In some people's eyes, obviously. How does one just commit an act like that without having nobody around him? He just did it by himself. And I've ran across this Promethean Action theory, and I took a lot of notes. And a lot of this makes so much sense today, even modern day time. So let's dive into it. What in the F was going on with the Abraham Lincoln murder, and why it's not. John Wilkes Booth was a part of an organization, an intelligence organization. Let's go.
John Wilkes Booth keeps running his mouth. Pull up and I'll Swiss cheese your ass. I got it on me. Abe, you're not like that. We just got the drop. It's on sight when I catch you. Yo, Chad, it's your boy, John Wilkes Booth. Got a little mission tonight, about to sneak into Ford's Theater and crash out. Sheet's about to go historically viral. Trust. All right, Gooners, we're inside now. I'm about to put this guy on a t-shirt. Mission is a go.
Chat, we did it. Mission complete. Rolled my ankle on the jump, but totally worth it. Drop a W Booth in the chat.
Story of Abraham Lincoln's assassination, the 16th president gunned down by John Wilkes Booth at Ford's Theater. But what if I told you there's a shadowy angle involving powerful European banks, secretly funding for the South, and radical movements that orchestrated it all? Today, we're exploring Lincoln's death through the lens of the Rothschild conspiracy theory and how England and London's central banking allegedly plotted against him from the start. If this intrigues you, smash the like button, subscribe, and let's uncover this history. I'm not saying I believe it. I'm not saying you have to believe it, but think about it. Be a critical thinker. Don't just let somebody stand up on a pew and just say some shit to you. Actually, think about it. All right, let's get a little recap on the official narrative. It's April 14th, 1865, just days after the Confederacy surrendered to Appomattox. Lincoln, riding high on the Union victory, heads to Ford Theater for a night out. Actor and Confederate sympathizer John Wilkes Booth sneaks into the presidential box, shouts, "Seek semper tyranny!" which means thus always to tyrants, and shoots Lincoln in the back of the head. Lincoln dies the next morning, plunging the nation into mourning. Booth flees, sparking a massive manhunt. He's cornered in a Virginia barn for 12 days and later killed. 8 conspirators are tied and 4 are hanged, including Mary Surratt. The motive, Booth's rage against the South's defeat. But that's just surface level. That's just high school surface level. You gotta dig deeper. And you'll find threads leading across the Atlantic to powerful financial forces who saw Lincoln as a threat to their global empire. Now let's shift to some alternative theories. Let's throw in the Rothschilds, where London's central banks and elite families like the Rothschilds allege engineered chaos to control America's finances. They came down hard when Lincoln was elected and secretly funded the South to tear the nation apart. From this conspiracy viewpoint, Lincoln's election in 1860 was a nightmare for Europe's banking elite, especially the Rothschilds, who dominated global finance through their branches in London, Paris, and beyond. And why? Lincoln rejected the high interest loans and centralized banking model. Instead, he issued greenbacks, a government-backed currency without debt to private banks, to fund the Union war effort. This bypassed the Rothschilds' grip, threatening the plan for U.S. central bank under their influence. Funny thing is, Russia was also involved in this little greenback thing and funding Lincoln. Little funny fact there. Historical accounts suggest the Rothschilds and the British banks came down on Lincoln by withholding major loans to the North early on. August Belmont, the Rothschilds' American agent in New York, tried to sabotage the Union financing while quietly supporting the South. And meanwhile, evidence points to secret funding for the Confederacy. The Rothschilds allegedly loaned out millions through French and British channels, betting on a divided America. Books like The Unseen Hand claim they funded both sides for maximum profits of control, and the North through bonds and the South through cotton and backing loans. When the South succeeded, British interests saw opportunities. A weak split U.S. couldn't challenge European empires. London's banks funneled cash via blockade runners and agents and prolonging the war. In Lincoln's greenbacks, a direct slap, he printed $450 million interest-free, saving the U.S. from bankruptcy. And conspiracies argue this sealed his fate, and the banks wanted him gone to install a puppet and establish the Federal Reserve, which happened in 1913 post-assassination attempts on other presidents. Russians even sent warships to U.S. ports in 1863 to deter British intervention, a nod to how Europe was pulling the strings. And in this theory, the Civil War wasn't just about slavery, which I've never felt that it was. It was a banker-orchestrated divide and conquer to enslave America in debt. But how does this tie to Lincoln's death? Enter radical groups like Young America and shadowy figures like George Saunders, suspected of colluding with Booth in failed kidnappings and the final kill of Abraham Lincoln. Let's spotlight the Young American movement, a fiery expansionist faction within the Democratic Party from the 1840s to the 1850s, often linked to the Manifest Destiny. It pushed for American dominance, but had deep Southern roots. It started gaining traction in places like South Carolina, a hotbed for secessionism, and where pro-slavery fire eaters dreamed of a vast Southern empire. And if you didn't know, the state where the Civil War started. Leading the charge was George Nicholas Saunders, a Kentucky-born agitator and editor of the Democratic Review. Journalist. Saunders embodied Young America's radical wing. He hobnobbed with European revolutionaries in the 1850s and advocated for progressive democracy that ironically supported Southern interests. As the U.S. Consul of London under Pierce, he plotted with exiles to stir uprisings, all while building ties to Confederate leaders. By the time of the Civil War, Saunders was full-blown Confederate agent living in Montreal, Canada, a hub of Southern espionage. He's suspected of masterminding plots against Lincoln, including failed kidnapping in March of 1865. The plan, Booth and his accomplice aimed to snatch Lincoln en route to visit soldiers at a hospital. The plan was to kidnap Lincoln at this hospital, take him to the South, and hold him ransom in hopes of releasing Confederate prisoners or peace terms. But Lincoln changed plans last minute, and the plot fizzled. Frustrated, Booth shifted to straight up assassinating him. Conspirators like Joseph Holt, the Union's judge advocate general, pointed fingers at Saunders for his involvement. Booth visited Montreal in 1864, meeting Saunders and drawing on Confederate funds. A $500 bill of exchange found on Booth's body linked back to Canadian banks with European ties. Saunders was accused of encouraging Booth, but perhaps as a proxy for bigger plans. Though charges were dropped due to lack of evidence, historians note Saunders' revolutionary zeal aligned with the banking interest. A dead Lincoln meant Reconstruction chaos and easier for foreign banks to influence, and Young American under Saunders morphed into a tool for pro-Southern distribution, blending nationalism with secession. This angle plants the assassination not as a lone wolf revenge involving Booth, but as a coordinated hit to eliminate a banking rebel. Now, the Young American movement was a worldwide thing. It was young Germany, young Poland, young Switzerland. And this was all started by a guy named Giuseppe Mazzini. Now, with Saunders and Booth, this is all intelligence. And I know I just pointed that a lot of the Confederate networking was going on in Montreal, Canada. Well, who rules Canada? England, okay? And let's start with this guy right here. Giuseppe Mazzini, aka the Soul of Italy, funded Young Italy in 1831 as a secret society to unify Italy and a republic through popular uprisings. Exiled after failed revolts, he expanded his model in 1834 with Young Europe, a network uniting radicals like Young Italy, Young Poland, Young Germany, Young Switzerland, and beyond. Mazzini dreamed of United States of Europe, but critics argue it was a tool to divide and conquer chaos. And Mazzini reminds me of our current day type guy like this, which is a George Soros. Mazzini spent much of his time, though, in London while he was in exile in 1837, living modestly and writing for British tabloids and rubbing shoulders with elites like Thomas Carlyle and John Stuart Mill. And he revived Young Italy from there and ran schools for Italian workers. But here's the controversial angle. Many sources claim Mazzini was a British intelligence asset, backed by Lord Palmerston's Foreign Office. And Palmerston, Britain's longtime foreign secretary, aka leader of the CIA, pursued aggressive interventionism to weaken his rivals in Austria, Russia, and France. And he allegedly used Mazzini as a proxy, funding and protecting young movements to spark revolutions that brought down empires and created opportunities for British influence. In this view, Mazzini's young template wasn't pure idealism. It was engineered nationalism to destabilize Europe. His network spread Young Germany, Young Poland, Young Switzerland, and crucially, they inspired radical groups worldwide, including Young America. But the connections of Saunders and Mazzini is really where this gets, I feel like, kind of answers the questions. Saunders, a key young American leader in the 1850s, he embodied his transatlantic radicalism, and Young America inspired Mazzini's European model. It pushed aggressive expansionism, republicanism, and support for European revolutions to divert from U.S. sectionalism tensions and open markets. Appointed to U.S. Consul to London in 1853 under Pierce, Saunders turned his residence into a hub of exiles, hosting dinners with Mazzini, and historians note Saunders' direct interactions. He was a close friend with Mazzini in some accounts and drawing on the same revolutionary playbook. This network fed Southern Confederate espionage. In Montreal during the war, Saunders coordinated plots against the North, including a failed 1865 Lincoln kidnapping, like we just went over. Mazzini's British-backed chaos model influenced Saunders, who allegedly channeled it into the Confederate secession. A dead Lincoln meant no strong Reconstruction, easier for foreign banks and radicals to exploit division. Judge advocates like John Holt accused Saunders of conspiracy in Lincoln's murder, offering a $25,000 bounty. But the charges were dropped. Young Americans' radical edge, rooted in Mazzini's template, morphed into tools for pro-agents, all with the London central banking system looming in the background. So to wrap this up, Lincoln's death through this theory's lens was a climax of a financial war. England and London's banks opposing his independence and secretly backing the South, and using radicals like Saunders and Booth to strike. Failed kidnaps escalated to a murder, reshaping America. And not to mention this, at the same time, the doughboy of England, which is that of France, that is controlled through the banking system, what do during the time of the American Civil War? They invade Mexico and install some guy that has nothing to do with Mexican culture. And they were funneling guns straight into the South. Now, I'm not here to tell you that I think that this is all British people. I'm not saying that. I have no problems with the British people. I don't think like that, okay? What I think is that I don't think history is really told from a truthful perspective. I think it's broken up into pieces and handed to you. It's like getting a cake, but like half the cake's missing and there's crumbs everywhere. And they throw this in books and want to tell you like, oh, it's over slavery. It was never over the slaves. The slaves played a part into it because at a certain point during the war, it was kind of noticed like, hey, we could probably use these guys, right? But white men in the South were not fighting to keep slaves, and white men in the North were not fighting to free the slaves. It was a catalyst. You always need a victim in a war, if you know what I mean. Not here to say that I think slaves should have stayed in, but like using that as a catalyst to today's culture, you see how it is utilized, and it's not. It doesn't make sense. Wars are 9 times out of 10 financial. Every bit of it, always. So I'm DJ Reels you in. Again, subscribe, like the channel. And if you like these type of videos, we'll keep doing them. I got plenty of theories on wars. Don't get me started on World War II. I'll piss.
Michigan, and then we're going to Washington D.C. to take back the White House. Ah!